to make yourself in this business. You take every small story that they are willing to give you, and you make every one of those shine. You just make them the best that they can be. And if you do that, your star will rise. And she said, and here's another piece of advice. She said, thank you notes. She said, after every interview, write a thank you note. She said, people always wonder how I get these big interviews. She said, when I see, like a little bit of news that, some celebrity has been cast to a movie or to a Broadway show, I immediately write a note to them. I immediately reach out, say, oh, what wonderful news. You're going to be fantastic in this. She said, and then when the movie comes out, who do you think they call? They call me because I've already got the ball rolling. And shortly after that, I started writing those thank you notes, and I got to tell you, I had a lot of interviews that I got on the days that David Hartman was gone, because that's the only time I got a big interview back in those days, kind of like Barbara. And I wrote thank you notes, and sometimes they would come back on and say, and I want Joan to do the interview. David Hartman would say, wait a minute, she's not supposed to be doing that interview. And I would get it. And the reason why was from the advice of Barbara. So something as simple as thank you notes. And by the way, that's not just for the TV industry, it's for any industry. But she worked hard to get all of those interviews. They didn't just come to her.
Nothing was given to her over the course of her career. As you said, in that moment, she was teaching you to be undeniable, right?
Yes. She had such a confident demeanor. There was just this air of confidence, that certain men have and that certain women have. And she had that. When they talk about an it factor, her it factor was an incredible strength and confidence. Now, saying that is one thing, but I remember when she first came to ABC, I was at Eyewitness News at the time in New York, and I remember there were the stories where that Sam Donaldson, there was a story that he went running through the halls yelling, the women are coming, the women are coming. And Harry Reasoner was so irate. I talked to someone one time who rode up in the elevator with them the first night to do that first night that she joined him on the network news, and he wouldn't speak to her in the elevator. I mean, to say that she was not welcomed with open arms would be the understatement of the century. I mean, she fought the same battle when she was at the Today Show.
Yeah, and we have to think that in the grand scheme of things, this wasn't altogether that long ago. And yet she dealt with all of this, and then so many women in this business, remarkable women in this business like you, who came after, you were fortunate enough to work with her and get advice from her. I'm curious, before you go, when you were out in Sacramento, and this is before you knew Barbara, but you were watching her every morning, what are some of the traits that you saw as a young journalist that you wanted to emulate?
She was comfortable in her own skin. I remember they went on a tour. I remember watching this, and they toured all around the United States from a different place all the time. And ironically, years later, Charlie Gibson and I would do the same thing. We would, with Good Morning America, take tours all around the country. But I remember watching her, and some mornings she would be there, and she would have like a little kerchief on, like her hair would be pulled back, and she'd literally have like a scarf on her head. And she was like, well, basically what she was saying is that we're in wherever we are, and we don't have time for a lot of hair and makeup, and I'm just here. And she was just always so comfortable. And, that kind of being at ease on television. And she, by the way, she was totally the same way in real life. She was just always at ease, and she had this way of making you feel at ease. So, I'm telling you how she made me feel at ease, but that is what she also did, obviously, with her guests. And, people have asked me what the hardest part was of doing Good Morning America, and I said, well, we got briefed ahead of time. We read people's books. We watched their movies. We had our questions. What was the hardest thing was making the guest, the person that you were interviewing, comfortable. And sometimes big stars would really be nervous and uncomfortable. And that was our job, to make them comfortable. And Barbara was just, that was one of her real true capabilities in being in the business of journalism, was being able to make someone else feel comfortable and feeling like they were safe with you. And by the way, and then once she got them feeling safe with her, that was when she could ask those questions.
That's right. That's when she asked those really tough questions.
Yeah.
Joan Lunden, thank you. I think you point out something that is really important. Barbara was comfortable in her own skin. That is not as easy as it sounds. And I think being so comfortable in her skin made some of the people she interviewed really uncomfortable. And I think that was that was part of her genius. Joan Lunden, thank you so much for helping us celebrate her life tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks, Phil.
Okay. Joining us now on the phone is Connie Chung, someone else who, with a remarkable career, had Barbara Walters, sort of pave the way, as we all did. Connie, thanks so much for taking the time to share your thoughts.
Oh, well, my goodness. I must tell you that I so admired Barbara. She was indefatigable. I first met her in 1969. I was working at a local station in Washington, D.C., and I wanted to interview her, so she agreed to meet me, and she picked me up in her limousine at the southwest gate of the White House. I met her there. I hopped in, and I kind of gave her an idea of what the interview was about, and it was something stupid, but she agreed to do it, and she scheduled it with me. Later, when I went on to CBS News, she was at NBC at the Today Show, and I was covering local news. Washington news, politics, etc. for Walter Cronkite, and Walter respected Barbara. There was an incredible story back when the Middle East was the big news of the hour, because Sadat and Begin were supposed to meet. And Walter Cronkite had an interview lined up with both of them. They were on a plane flying with Walter was on a plane flying with Sadat and Begin. Barbara shows up on the tarmac, waving frantically, saying, "Don't leave yet, wait for me." And so Sadat looks out there and sees her and says, "Baba, Baba." He got the plane to wait for Barbara. When she got on, she decided she would surreptitiously find a way to get an interview with Sadat and Begin before Walter did. She sent them a little note and said, "Will you do an interview with me first? Check one box, yes, no, or whatever." They said yes. And she scooped, she beat out Walter Cronkite, and I'm telling you, Walter respected her terribly. He really respected her, unlike some of the younger anchors who came along later, who engaged in audacious behavior, rude, disrespectful, and appalled. I was really appalled at so many of the younger people who came along and disrespected her. I must tell you, Phil, I followed in Barbara's footsteps. As you know, when she was named co-anchor with Harry Reaser, he despised her. And then 20 years later, Barbara was the first woman to co-anchor the evening news. It was the ABC News, of course. And I was the second. it was 20 years later, and I, too, was not quite welcome by my co-anchor. And when I was dumped after 2 years, as she was dumped after 2 years, only Barbara Walters could console me because she knew exactly how it felt. I also followed in her footsteps when we both forgot to have a baby. So Barbara adopted a baby, and I adopted a baby. So anyone who hasn't followed in her footsteps more than I have. She also, one other thing, Barbara basically supported her family. Her father was a nightclub owner, and it crashed, and she was the sole support of her mother and her father and her sister, who had a disability. And I was the sole support of my parents as well. So we both felt that we needed to have a job. And we did what we had to do. Barbara was an amazing, incredible woman. She was competitive as heck. And yet, when I was competing against her, she would send me a note saying, "You did a great job. I'm glad you got it." And she would send me these Barbara Grahams, these lovely letters. Then I came to ABC to work with her. And believe me, her competitiveness was very clear to me. I saw her MO, and she scared the bejesus out of me. I would not compete with Barbara because Barbara, was the winner, always. I remember one time she, I know what it was. When I was dumped at CBS, she called me immediately, just the way Joan was saying. She called me immediately, and she set her sights on getting the first interview with me after I had been sitting fallow. And, of course, I gave it to Barbara. Who else? She would send letters and notes and faxes and calls. She would call. She knew exactly how to get an interview with anybody and everybody.
That Walter Cronkite story you told is so great. There was so much to respect about Barbara Walters, but in this business, nothing makes you respect someone more than someone beating you on a story, and even being able to beat Walter Cronkite. Connie Chung, thank you so much for calling in and helping us remember and celebrate Barbara tonight.
All right. I'll miss her terribly, Phil.
So many people do this evening. Connie, thank you.
Thank you.